So what's the best moment in like the company evolution that we're a good fit? Like a discovery that we had was that regardless of the company size, so that was, I didn't expect that, but regardless of the company size, whenever they open like in a new geography and they target that, you have a different culture, which means different customer objections, which means an opportunity for us to come in.
The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Alex Poe, welcome to Founder Secrets.
Thank you for having me, Flavio and Taylor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Alex is originally from Romania. We over-index on Romanian founders in this podcast for some reason.
You'd think it's a huge country with like hundreds of millions of people.
Like 20% of founders come from it's the new Israel. So, and Alex is now in San Francisco, as you can tell from the forest in the background. He's not in New York. And so welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You just finished Techstars in Silicon Valley, and super curious how that is. It anything like the show Silicon Valley, or how's your experience been?
Well, for us, it was an awesome experience. It was a huge learning, like super intense period of like 3 months and a half. We started early October and we just had demo day like 2 weeks ago, like January 11th. It was awesome. It was structured in like 3 big parts. One was the jobs to be done framework, in which we basically went back to the customers and really drilled down on what are the needs and how can we best serve them. As a result of that, we now have a brand new product that we built from scratch. The second part was basically, it's called Mentor Madness. And you kind of like connect to almost 35 to 40 people in a matter of like 7 days, which is insane. There are a lot of calls. But as a result of that, you get a couple of main mentors that are along with you during the journey, and like you have weekly meetings. So that was my favorite part of the process. And of course, the last part of the program was dedicated towards demo day, perfecting your pitch, and yeah, all that good stuff. It was awesome, like super founder friendly team. Yeah, happy to talk more about it.
Would you recommend it to other entrepreneurs looking to jumpstart their business?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I would recommend it both to those who are like super early stage, but even, maybe like seed stage or a bit or like seed plus, because I think it's a great, awesome network to have. And especially for us coming from Romania and relocating to the US. So this was for us the launch pad into the Bay Area. And it's super valuable. And once you're in, you're like Techstars for life. So that means, even after this company, you still have access to the community. Yeah, I would really, from all my heart, like super recommend the program. And they're different. Like each Techstars program is really different based on their own managing director. I can fully speak on behalf of our program, the Oakland, as well as the eBay San Francisco one. There were 2. But I mean, all of the Techstars programs, I've just heard good stuff about it.
You said the jobs to be done framework. Can you just maybe elaborate for, I don't know
Sure.
what it is either, anybody that doesn't know?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, we all know about like customer discovery, customer research, but how we used to do it before the jobs to be done was that I would ask a customer like, hey, what do you think about, and then I go into a hypothetical thing, which it's hard for them to imagine. So jobs to be done, and there are a million different forms of interpretations of it, but like we actually did it with like the creator of it. It's super focused on facts, data, so things that happened. I'm not interested in like future tense verbs. I'm just interested in what you did. Regardless of like the product, it's like, okay, you bought this. When did you buy it? How did you buy it? I'm more like, how was the experience around you? So it's very related in like past, super concrete facts, because underneath it, if you actually listen, are like needs that they don't even, like the buyers don't even know themselves. So We did that a lot. We really did that a lot, and it shifted how we approached our customers and prospects, and how we had that, conversation.
How did you determine like what to ask them or what to ask them about?
Mm.
So it sounds like you asked them about a specific, hey, what was it like buying a car? Is that right? Like you chose something and then drilled into that, or how did that work?
Yeah, so it doesn't have a preset of questions. They actually just encourage you. Let's just first do like the screening super clear. So in our case, we're in sales enablement. So we focused on sales enablement managers who bought a sales enablement a sales enablement tool like maximum 6 months ago. So it was still fresh in their mind, and we just analyzed and discussed, what came on the spot. Like whenever we saw them think a while, or like we listened to the tone of voice, we dug in a bit deeper there, open-ended questions all the time. Why did you do that? So that was a lot of like, yeah. So it's not a framework of like follow these questions. They actually tell you don't write anything before, just be attentive, and things like when they're describing a situation, you go, okay, who was there with you? What were you hearing? Because that puts them very clear in that memory. Because that's when they made a purchasing decision. So that, when you actually pay money, that's assumed, right? So it's all about understanding that moment. And then you go basically on, it's more like a time frame thing. So you're like, when did you first hear about the product? What was happening then in the company? Okay, so why didn't you buy then? Oh, well, because so and so. So you're like just following the facts in a time kind of like framework.
What was most surprising, or what kind of patterns did you notice in interviewing all these different people?
Yeah. Well, I expected everything to be like, well, we bought sales conversion tools to increase like the conversion rates, and it was not the case. I mean, of course, in the end, it's about increasing productivity and all that, but they're like things like when you have a smaller size company, the most important thing is like a CRM, and it's more about like the visibility that a senior needs to have on the employee. So it's not necessarily focused so much on like, let's increase sales. It's more like, how are my reps performing? And what stops them from performing on the top level? Another interesting insight was, for instance, the moment in time, because we tried to determine what's the best moment, because we don't have a CRM, and we don't provide that. So what's the best moment in like the company evolution that we're a good fit? And a potential, like a discovery that we had was that regardless of the company size, so that was, I didn't expect that, but regardless of the company size, whenever they open like in a new geography, and they target that, you have a different culture, which means different customer objections, which means an opportunity for us to come in. And yeah, you can do that with like a 50 people startup. You can do that with a multinational, right? So that was surprising.
Very cool. So the company you co-founded is called Chambr, without an E, CHAMBR.
Yeah.
And maybe talk about how you went about starting it. What did it do initially, and what does it do now?
Sure. So Chambr uses AI to help sales teams close more deals through game-based simulations. But a story starts, I met my co-founder, Gabriela, back in Romania at a place called the Alternative University. And this was in 2015. And this was a university created by students. And Flavio, you're from Romania. So like, you can imagine what that means, like knowing like the traditional Romanian university. All of a sudden, it's a place created by students with like all sorts of learning, like democratic learning, agile learning, game-based learning. So we had a life-changing experience there. And every year, the university used to have a camp, and each day was centered around one of the 6 values of the universities, which were freedom, kindness, playing, learning, daring, collaborating. And basically, I was a designer for the playing day. Gabriela was a designer for the learning day. That was in 2017. And after the camp, we were like, okay, let's see what happens if we just put these 2 values together. So that was the genesis of our first startup called PlayLearn. And with PlayLearn, we gamified corporate learning, creating custom learning board games for corporations. Again, initially in Romania, but we worked with multinationals like KPMG, like UiPath, T-Mobile, so global companies. And then the pandemic came. So the board games were played at the office, right? So if all of a sudden no one's at the office anymore. So we lost all our contracts in a matter of days. It was, now I can say it was a transformative year, but it was hard. It was one of the hardest years of our lives. But at the end of it, we started building, after a couple of like failed attempts, we started building what would eventually become Chambr. And with Chambr, so Chambr was a tech startup, right? We didn't have experience running a tech startup before, but we did speak with the customers, design based on their needs, not on what you think. So we had a lot of learnings, and we also had a bit of understanding about the market. So we targeted the same corporate learning market, the same enterprise customer. So when we launched an initial MVP, when in 2022, we got some initial traction. We got a few paying customers. However, we noticed that, the mission for us never changed. We want to upgrade learning to the 21st century through play. However, for an enterprise, learning is a nice to have in many times. And, especially, 2023, everyone expecting a recession, it was a budget that it was just, doomed to be cut. So we started doing the pivot to sales enablement in August of last year. We did a pre-accelerator called Transcend. And then right after Transcend, we got into Techstars, and that's where we completed the pivot. So that's kind of like the super brief explanation of the last 7 years. But yeah.
That's awesome. Congrats. Do you do all the design, by the way, on the website?
No. No,
really
I thank you, but I'm not. I mean, if I would do the design, it would look bad. So that's my co-founder Gabriela, and we have a few. So we have a UI friend who helps us, and we've been working with them. They're actually a team of two since the early days of PlayLearn. They did our logos, and yeah, we're now working with them for the design part. But Gabby, she does the UX, so they help with the graphics.
So you sold a bunch of customers, like you said that you made it sound so easy. Like we launched this MVP and we sold a few customers, and then we pivoted. So I'm curious, A, how did you sell those first customers, and B, how did you pull them through the pivot?
Yeah, great question. So initially we were targeting like training companies, but like it was also, we had two actually enterprise customers. When you're selling like to enterprise, it's all about the relationship that you've been building with them. So it helped that we were already in the space. And then it was very, step by step. So with an initial prototype that was working, but like not the best, we got an initial contract. And then based on that, we developed a better product. But it was a process of like 6 months. That was quite painful, and when we didn't even know, are people going to buy exactly? Or we did a lot of outreach on LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn to do like outbound, but we validated in this way the value prop. So we tried, I think in the past 18 months, we ran 250-ish experiments on different value props. Collected the data, analyzed, which one got the most traction. And based on the value prop, we can also like iterate on like how we saw the product, as well. So yeah, we did a lot of testing and market validation through those initial discussions. And that informed the product. And then, yeah, as we got the customers, it wasn't SaaS from the very beginning. Some of them were like either very small recurring fees, but then some of them were like quarterly based fees. But then, yeah, as with each customer, we learned a lot. So, SaaS annual revenue is the way to go now.
So what does the product do for the sales teams? How like if I'm a user, what do I see, or what's my interface into the product?
So we just launched the new product less than 2 weeks ago, right before demo day. Basically, it's an AI customer persona. We can feed it content based on, let's say, your corporation, and we can feed it content based on your own customers, so that your sales reps, they can actually do role plays and practice their pitch as if they were talking with a real life prospect. And what that helps, because we've noticed less even than 25% of US sales reps achieve their targets, and a lot of that is lost in the top of funnel, especially like junior reps, because some of them really need like 3 to 6 months until they get up to speed, but they lose a lot of valuable prospects. So what we do, because they're thrown into sales calls without, just watching a couple of videos, and you don't learn how to sell by just watching videos. So, what we do is we help them practice with the AI, but without the, in the safety of not losing prospects. So once you do that, practice makes perfect. When they're in the call, they are already pretty much up to speed. So we provide the analytics. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, what is the practice? Like, is it that they're on a call and they're talking to a robot, or is it all via text? Like, what is the practice for them?
Yeah, they're not necessarily on a call. They're like on the platform, but they're talking with voice. Yeah, directly with the AI. And the AI then afterwards provides them like with a buying decision, like I would buy, I would not buy, and this is why. And then we provide also some analytics, like how many, what was your speed of talking, but like also what was the tonal voice, what was the listen to speaking ratio, because as a seller, you need to listen more than you speak, right? So, and especially junior reps are not necessarily aware of that. So we provide.
So they give a pitch. Is that the way it works? Like I give my pitch for the product, and then the AI listens to it and gives a score or gives feedback. Is that?
It will ask you questions. Basically, you're gonna say, I don't know, I'm selling my podcast, and they're gonna be, okay, how long is the podcast? What's the reach? Or like, I'm just, really as if you were speaking to a customer. So they would ask questions. The AI would be something like, okay, I'm worried about like security, or like, I don't know. It really depends on each product. But yeah, that's how it works.
Very interesting. Almost kind of want to try it, to be honest. We're both, I think we're all in sales, but Taylor and I'd say we like sales, embrace it, and so I would want to try it, to be honest, to believe it.
Sure.
But if it works, it does sound really incredible. My next question is really about, like, I find a lot in this space of enterprise, the pendulum swinging oftentimes between a one solution that solves one specific problem, like outreach IO, right? That just does outbound emails or customer feedback tools, surveys. But now it seems like more and more these tools are becoming everything to everyone, right? Salesforce does everything, HubSpot does everything, Zendesk now does everything, not just customer support. And I'm wondering, how do you view this? Because you have more kind of a focused solution, and so how do you view this world? Do you have to integrate with these guys? Do you think the pendulum is swinging back, where people are craving these one solutions and don't want everything in one? How do you view it, Mark?
No, it's definitely a great question. I think if you're building like a more niche product, you really have to be a couple of steps forward so that you bring a lot more value, because they're making a compromise. The end user wants less platforms, and either you give them something really good, which, we believe that we have something really good. But also, I think moving forward, we're focusing a lot on integrations, because it's all about how easy it is for the end user to like interact with it. And as a founder, of course, you want your product to be sticky, but not just like from a, business model perspective, but more for like the end user, how easy and seamless it is for them to interact with it. So for instance, this is why we built a Microsoft partnership, because, there's a lot of enterprises who use Teams and the Microsoft suite. So we integrated with Teams. It can be accessed directly. Like this is what we did with the previous product. And we'll also do with a new product as well. it can be accessed directly from Teams.
Just real quick, like, how did you build I bet everyone in the world, especially today with ChatGPT, wants to build a Microsoft partnership. How did you do it?
I mean, it all started with like Microsoft for startups, but I think, and this is super important for like any founder, because, you know, you can get into Microsoft for startups. They do all the good stuff like credits and all that. However, that puts you in a relationship with Microsoft, which is a beast of a company. It's so big, right? So, it's up to you. And this is also applicable to like accelerators. It's up to you, to the founder, to make the most out of it. They're not gonna be let us help you with everything that no, but if you do the outreach, if you speak and you ask, hey, I want to talk with like the sales manager, or like I want to talk with like different people, they're gonna be super open to, you know, checking out who you are, checking out what your startup does. So that's in the end what helped us to have those conversations about the Teams integration, as well as the publication on the Azure Marketplace, because that all comes as a result of the relationship that you're building to them. And that for us, so Microsoft for Startups was the beginning, but then it was a lot of, you know, relationship building, meeting people as much as we can, having a lot of Zoom calls with as many people as we could actually from Microsoft. Hope that answered.
No, congratulations. That's a huge deal. And okay, next I want to ask you about how you actually do sales, because this is something, again, I think we're both passionate about here, and have different opinions that have changed over time, and like email and phone calls and automation and AI, and how good is AI at outreach. So I'm wondering how you go about getting customers today for Chambr. Like, where do you start?
Yeah, so and our approach changed, of course, as well. Like, I think, so what we've seen is the most effective is like intros. It's so much better to just have a warm intro from someone to introduce you to, and that's where I would start. So if I'm, you know, having an ICP in mind, I'm doing my research on LinkedIn, and then I'm seeing like connections, like common connections, and then I would ask for an intro. I think this is so much better than doing cold. However, the cold is never, you know, you never should stop cold, regardless of, you know, the response, because you get a lot of data. So I've been using Apollo to automate, but then really, I mean, I'm not 100% convinced with like email. I still do more like LinkedIn outreach, but I juggle in between these two for like cold. And then usually like the sales cycle, especially when you're selling to enterprise, it can be like around 6 to 9 months, which means, you know, from initial contact until like contract signature, it can be even sometimes longer. However, that in between that, you know, we have a bunch of demos, actually 4 demos, and they go up. Like at the beginning, it can be like, you know, someone who doesn't have the decision-making power, but as you go up, kind of like you have them on your side, and it's about making a collaboration so that they're a success in their company. Because if they sign, they're putting their name on the line, right? So you really need to help them as a founder or a sales rep to achieve that success internally, regardless of, you know, what you need. So it really takes, you know, they need to have, it's kind of like relationship based. I feel like meeting face to face, it's not that in terms of time super efficient, but it does help. If you can go for a coffee, because, you know, if you're on a Zoom or a Teams call, it's super, you know, not necessarily just transactional, but you don't have that space to talk a bit more like personal stuff, right? So I would encourage, if they're validated, to have that coffee and just meet in person, because it does increase the conversion rates. And then we're using like the Microsoft partnership to sell through them. So that hopefully that's meant to reduce the sales cycle if Microsoft is already a vendor to them, because you can bypass stuff like, you know, IT, procurement, security departments.
How does that work? Like how do their salespeople actually sell on your behalf, or do you go to the meetings? How does it work?
I mean, it's layers and milestones that if you achieve, the more you do, the more successful you are, the more Microsoft is involved as well. But basically it all starts from the Azure Marketplace integration. that starts with the fact that so if I have an enterprise who wants to buy my solution, they can buy it already through the marketplace, but that means they buy it from Microsoft as a vendor. And then basically that already skips a lot of other approvals. That's one. The more you sell, the more actual customer sales teams get involved. And I'm not sure how like super open and I'm not sure how much I can disclose, but like it's all available if you just do the research on Microsoft for startups. I mean, they're quite open and they've been a super, super huge help to us. But yeah, you can get the teams involved.
That's amazing. So, so when I first started Signal Insights, so I used to own an agency, a marketing agency. The whole business was relationships. I spent so much time in person, going to drinks with people and lunch, but I was selling very expensive things,
Correct.
50K, 100K, 200K. So those relationships were very worth it. And in this business, I have a much lower ACV, average customer value, than than in that business. And what I found when I started here is that I would get a lot of meetings. So people would say, "Oh yeah, I like Taylor. I'll introduce you to Bob." And so Bob would meet with me because he knows Flavio. But Bob actually had no intention of buying from me. He just did it because he knows Flavio, and Flavio asked for a favor. So how are you able to parse? And of course, Bob gives feedback because he was asked, right? But Bob's not a buyer. So how are you able to kind of navigate that? Because I think that it's common advice to be told, go get introductions. And I think it can work really, really well, especially in a relationship business. But it can also be a real trap. Like it can be, because you can go down rabbit holes, because Bob's never going to buy this product. Bob only is talking to me because Flavio asked him to. So how are you able to kind of navigate that and figure out who really had good feedback and what's worth building a product around?
Sure. Well, one, if you get a good relationship with Bob, then maybe Bob can introduce you to someone because they cannot be a buyer. But of course, that just increases the sales cycle. So I think one, you have to definitely calculate like the CAC and, what you were saying before with like, is the ACV worth it? But then the second part of your question was more about like product feedback or like, how do you navigate it? So of course, you have to speak to many Bobs or like, many people who are actually not necessarily in need of your product, but if they fit, like the ICP, you can always, at least having their feedback on your product, can be valuable. And then if you do that with like 10, 20, 30 Bobs, you being just a one-man show, then yeah, you can start seeing like the overlaps. But I think, and that can be tricky. That can be tricky with like when investors give you feedback about product, because I've seen many entrepreneurs like shifting their whole business models, the product visions, because, they got like 10 no's from a couple of VCs. I think that, don't take me wrong. I think feedback is super valuable. I think also that, every founder needs to have like kind of like a critical thinking to discern between the feedback. Any prospect feedback I find is super more valuable for you as a founder because you're about your customers, right? As long as you follow them and like you tailor your niche around their needs, you're gonna be fine. But not all feedback is created equal, and I would be a bit more careful with like the investor feedback because if you have a passion and a desire to build something in that space that is not necessarily super VC backable or super scalable, maybe you should do it. Unless, do you really want to be VC backable? Then, so yeah, that's in a different direction. I didn't want to.
No, let's dive into that. One thing is clear: people named Bob are very tricky to sell to. That's for sure.
Bob's.
Yeah.
But if we, pivot to fundraising a little bit, I'm curious how you view fundraising differently. Of course, we hear about the market being more challenged, especially for later stage companies. And in my experience, the accelerator, we did a Techstars healthcare accelerator in New York, and that did help with our seed round. So I'm wondering, how you view fundraising right now with the market, what it is. Are you more focused on cash, and how do you view fundraising differently in the current kind of environment?
Sure. And that's, I think, a great question. Well, I dipped my toes in the fundraising market end of 22, beginning of 23. It was my first, well, yeah, I've been in New York previously, but this was my first real time like doing business in New York. And I started conversations now with investors, even if we haven't officially started the fundraise yet. How I see, I get a different feeling. So I get like the market is still bad. However, at the beginning of 23, everyone was expecting a huge recession. Nobody knew what was going to come. So, however, now when I'm speaking, and this is just a slight difference. I feel a bit that investors see like the worst is a bit behind. There was a bit of a recession, but like, now the stock market is back to all time high, or like the IPO markets are starting to slowly get back to speed, especially like in the second half of 24. And that brings more liquidity in the markets for, angels, LPs. That means more money available for the VCs, but it takes a bit of time, but like everything is forward looking, right? And investing is forward looking. So, when you have a bit that time perspective, I think I felt as a founder, like they were a bit more optimistic, certainly not, going back to 21 or 2020 anytime soon. However, I feel like, and this is something that I'm sure Flavio, like you also had that in Techstars, just focus on the customers, focus on, generating revenue, generating traction. And also, and this is super important, like try to be scrappy, try to, keep the burn rate low. Because again, you don't need to like raise and then immediately hire. I know how many people just because you think they will like grow the business, right? So I'm not necessarily, I view it a bit more positive than last year was, but certainly not going any time back in 2020. And I've seen like an interesting statistic. So in 23, there was a huge drop in like VC funding compared to like 21 and 22, but the level of funding was still comparable to like 2017 and 2018. And I know I don't have now the graph. I'm gonna please investigate this. But 2017 and 2018 were not seen as disastrous years, right? It's just when you compare it to 2021, it's not that anymore. So yeah, but I'm a founder. I need to see things a bit more positive because otherwise I won't survive. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. This is just what I've been feeling in the past month from the market.
What do you kind of see as the future? Let's say over the course of the next 12 months, what would you like to see in terms of the product and the business? What are the goals that you have, or what are you kind of thinking?
Sure. Like basically, so we have a couple of really big names, waiting to try out the new product, and then we want to like sign pilots, but then expand those pilots into annual contracts. We project to make somewhere between 500K to close to 1 million this year in recurring, and it all depends on how we will sign those. But I think for us, the critical thing was that we shifted as a business from HR, which is a cost center, and targeting like a business center, and more specifically, bringing value to like increasing conversion rates, which, that brings more revenue. And I think, yeah, that's like a good target to have for a startup when you're bringing value. So that's how we see. We don't want to, we really go in like the land and then expand. So I'm more happy to, I don't need to have super margins on the first contracts. I just want to start working with the companies, build a relationship, bring value, and then, expand the contract as we move further. And you said in terms of like the product as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, post raise, we want to bring in our friend on the UI part time as well. So and they will work together. So we have Gabi on product and also our CTO doing the code, and she would help us with the UI. That is a really good team because they've all known each other for many years and been working together. And that can really bring us to a point where if you look over our website, we have a character there. So we're bringing a world that we've been building over several years on top of like the product. So that's our dream to like, bring this into our world and bring this into the enterprise world, because we were very fascinated by like the top three companies that we look up to are Nintendo, Lego, and Disney. All of them have some sort of magic. And we want to take that, the magic that you feel as a child when you play, when you discover something, and bring that to a workforce that, it's a bit more boring and not maybe as fun sometimes, right? So yeah, hope I answered.
It's tying in the play aspect of the last business. Is that where the character came from?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything like the character doesn't have to do with like the last business. However, the values playing and learning are there. Yeah. So
I love that you brought that forward.
Yeah. And I think, and the mission is pretty much the same. And I think, for us as people, first of all, that's our mission. That's why we're here to upgrade learning through play. So yeah, that hopefully will not, I don't see that changing regardless of like how the company does.
All right. Well, so as we wrap here, kind of a couple last questions are: what advice do you have for young entrepreneurs out there? And two, we'll all go around and share a little hack, a life hack that we have in the last few weeks. So you go first, Alex. If with what
so
you
share. Advice for young entrepreneurs and a life hack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, the sooner that you start, the better. Any idea that you have in your mind, the more people you can talk to and ask opinions about like what they think about this idea. Like, I think the sooner you get it out of your mind, the better. And then, yeah, just start and be prepared to shift a million times your idea until you actually have, a contract and then a product. That's why I'm saying like how young or like what stage are the entrepreneurs? Because if we're pre-seed, that's too early advice. So, but this is like for someone like I was imagining someone out of college, just having an idea. So that's who I imagined when you said that.
with a hack. What's a hack?
My hack is to take control of screen time. We talked about this on. We had a guest on talking about this too, and it's a total game changer. I think that it's. I didn't encourage, but one of my wife's friends asked about it, and then she did it. So basically, the hack is to enable screen time passcode that you don't know. Someone else knows it. So there's no way to override it. And you disable all overrides. So there's no iCloud override, none of it. So it's just focused on, and with very strict limits, and it disables at night. And this changed my life. I did it a year and a half ago. It completely changed how I use my phone. Anyway, I was sharing this with one of my wife's friends, and that was maybe a month ago. And she sent a text a week ago, and she said, "This changed my life. Like I'm just so grateful for doing this change." Now, hopefully she sticks with it if she wants to, but it's just such I think these phones, and we all live digitally, but I think the phones can be very challenging. And so limiting them, I think, is wonderful. That's my hack.
Can I just add something? Because I realize I just said the advice, but not necessarily the hack. Explore like working in time frames of like 25 minutes with 5-minute breaks. Especially like I've noticed, for instance, there are a lot of Zoom calls that are like 30 minutes. So like, I feel like my time is divided in between chunks of 30 minutes. So if you have like, a break between two calls, that's usually 30 minutes. And, having those 25 minutes of intense work and then, just let your mind flow for like 5 minutes. that I feel is like a good for me and my co-founder Gabby worked really well, and we discovered that in Techstars because we needed to be super efficient. So yeah, that's my hack.
It's awesome. So I recently had to do some Airbnb trip booking, and it's like really hard for multiple people, and it's hard to find the right place. And then I learned the Airbnb has this like trip design team that will help you help you design the trip. And more importantly, in my case, I was like, I can't find this house. I needed this many bedrooms because there's so many people, and there's like none available in Austin, Texas at this time. And sure enough, this team gave me some options that for some reason they're not listed. They're not even listed when I search Airbnb. But they basically did all the research for me and gave me back like 8 options to book. So it's a little hack for those of you out there that are using Airbnb for.
How do you talk to this team?
Nice.
You can contact them via the support Airbnb. It's got like a message right in the Airbnb app where you can contact Airbnb support, and they forward you to the trip design team. And boom, next thing you know, this woman who's lovely, they even have a phone number. You can even call them. They're so nice.
Nice.
Whoa.
Cool. That's a super hack.
That's a great hack. I'm going to use that because I'm also booking a trip for a large group in April. So that's...
You hacked Airbnb.
Yeah, hacked Airbnb.
There we go. Keep it on Founder Secrets. Don't tell anybody. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and good luck growing Chambr.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I love talking to you guys. You're a blast. Thank you.
Thanks,
right.
Alex.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.